Cop arrests black nurse, not knowing her husband is an FBI agent. What would you do if you witnessed an arrest like Sarah's? Share this story if you believe that accountability and justice should apply to everyone, regardless of their badge. Comment below with your thoughts on police reform and community oversight. Your voice matters in creating the change our communities need. Detective Marcus Williams was reviewing case files in his downtown FBI office when his phone buzzed at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March. The caller ID showed his wife's number, but the voice on the other end wasn't Sarah's. "Sir, this is Officer Rodriguez with Metro Police Department. Your wife has been arrested and is currently being processed at the Central Booking Facility." Marcus dropped his pen. His wife, Dr. Sarah Williams, was supposed to be driving home from her shift at St. Mary's Hospital, where she worked as a pediatric intensive care nurse. She'd texted him 2 hours earlier saying she was grabbing groceries after work. "Arrested for what?" Marcus asked, his federal training kicking in as he grabbed his badge and gun. "Resisting arrest, assault on a police officer, and public intoxication." Officer Rodriguez read from what sounded like a report. "She became belligerent during a routine traffic stop and attacked Officer Jensen." Marcus knew 3 things immediately. First, his wife hadn't had a drink in over 2 years. Second, Sarah had never raised her voice at anyone, let alone assaulted someone. Third, his wife was about to become the most expensive mistake the Metro Police Department had ever made. What Officer Rodriguez didn't know was that Marcus Williams wasn't just any FBI agent. For the past 14 months, he'd been leading a federal civil rights task force investigating patterns of racial bias and excessive force within the Metro Police Department. His desk was covered with complaint files, body camera footage, and witness statements documenting systematic targeting of black citizens during traffic stops, and they had just arrested his wife. Marcus grabbed his federal credentials and headed for the door. In the elevator, he called his supervisor, Special Agent in Charge, Patricia Hayes. "Hayes, Pat, it's Marcus. They just arrested Sarah." There was silence on the line. Hayes knew exactly who they were. She also knew that Marcus had been building the most comprehensive civil rights case against a police department in the Bureau's recent history. "How bad?" Hayes asked. "Bad enough that I'm about to accelerate our timeline by 6 months." As Marcus drove toward the jail, he had no idea that his wife's arrest had been recorded by 3 different cell phone cameras, captured on nearby security footage, and witnessed by over 20 people in the grocery store parking lot. He also didn't know that Officers Jensen and Rodriguez had been on his investigation list for 8 months. The federal case that was supposed to take another year to build was about to explode overnight. Dr. Sarah Williams had been a pediatric intensive care nurse at St. Mary's Hospital for 7 years. At 34, she was one of the most respected nurses in the PICU, known for her ability to comfort frightened children and work seamlessly with families during their darkest moments. Her colleagues called her the baby whisperer, of her uncanny ability to calm even the most distressed infants. Sarah had grown up in Detroit, the daughter of a schoolteacher and an auto worker. She'd put herself through nursing school working 2 jobs, graduated summa cum laude, and specialized in pediatric critical care because she believed every child deserved someone fighting for their life. She was soft-spoken, methodical, and had never received so much as a speeding ticket in her entire life. Her husband Marcus was her opposite in many ways. Where Sarah was gentle and nurturing, Marcus was intense and analytical. He'd joined the FBI straight out of law school 12 years earlier, specializing in civil rights violations and public corruption. He was the kind of agent who built cases methodically, gathering evidence like pieces of a puzzle until the picture became undeniable. Marcus had been assigned to the Metro Police Department investigation after a series of high-profile incidents involving black citizens had drawn federal attention. 3 separate families had filed complaints, alleging their relatives had been targeted for traffic stops, subjected to excessive force, and falsely charged with crimes. The patterns were subtle but consistent. Certain officers repeatedly stopped black drivers in affluent neighborhoods, often claiming suspicious behavior or drug-related activity without evidence. The investigation had consumed Marcus for over a year. He'd reviewed hundreds of traffic stop reports, body camera videos, and arrest records. He'd interviewed witnesses, analyzed GPS data from police vehicles, and built a database of stop patterns that revealed clear racial targeting. What he'd discovered was a systematic operation where certain officers were deliberately targeting black professionals particularly those driving nice cars in predominantly white neighborhoods. Officers Jensen and Rodriguez were at the center of his investigation. In the past 18 months, they had made over 60 traffic stops of black drivers, with arrest rates nearly 4 times higher than the department average. Their body camera footage showed a pattern of escalating minor encounters into arrests. Through aggressive tactics and false claims of resistance, Marcus had been building a case that would result in federal civil rights charges, department-wide reforms, and potentially criminal prosecutions. He'd been working with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to ensure every piece of evidence was bulletproof before they moved forward. He never imagined his own wife would become their final piece of evidence. Sarah's Tuesday shift had been particularly difficult. She'd spent 12 hours caring for a 6-year-old boy who'd been in a car accident, helping his parents understand his treatment plan, and advocating with doctors for additional pain management. By 8:30 p.m., she was emotionally drained but satisfied that her patient was stable and improving. She stopped at Morrison's Market, a grocery store 2 blocks from their home in the Riverside neighborhood. It was the same store she'd shopped at twice a week for 3 years. She parked her Honda Accord in the well-lit parking lot, grabbed a cart, and went inside to pick up ingredients for the dinner she'd promised to cook for Marcus when he got home from his late meeting. The store was busy for a Tuesday night. Sarah recognized several neighbors and nodded hello to Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived on her street. She selected fresh salmon, vegetables for a salad, and Marcus's favorite ice cream. At the checkout, she chatted with Teresa, the cashier who always asked about her patients. Sarah loaded her groceries into her trunk at 9:15 p.m. She was tired, looking forward to cooking dinner and hearing about Marcus's day. She had no idea that officers Jensen and Rodriguez had been watching her from their patrol car parked across the street. She also had no idea that they had run her license plate and discovered she lived in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in their patrol area. To them, a young black woman driving a nice car and shopping in an upscale area fit their profile perfectly. As Sarah closed her trunk and walked toward her driver's door, she noticed the police car pulling into the parking lot behind her. She thought nothing of it. Police cars were common in the area, and she'd never had any negative interactions with law enforcement. She was about to discover that her husband's federal investigation was about to become very personal. What happened next would be captured on multiple cameras, witnessed by dozens of people, and become the catalyst for the largest federal civil rights case against the police department in the state's history. Officer Jensen activated his emergency lights as he pulled behind Sarah's Honda. She was already in her driver's seat, adjusting her mirrors and checking her phone for messages from Marcus. The sudden flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror confused her. She hadn't been speeding, hadn't broken any traffic laws, and was parked legally in a grocery store lot. She rolled down her window as Officer Jensen approached. Behind him, Officer Rodriguez was getting out of the passenger side, his hand resting on his service weapon. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" Sarah asked, her voice calm and professional. Officer Jensen shined his flashlight directly into her face, forcing her to squint. "License and registration. Step out of the vehicle." Sarah was confused but compliant. "May I ask why you're stopping me?" "I was just grocery shopping." "License and registration. Now." Jensen's voice was aggressive, commanding, "And step out of the car. Don't make me ask again." Sarah reached slowly for her purse, keeping her hands visible. She'd had conversations with Marcus about police encounters, knew the importance of remaining calm and following instructions. She handed Jensen her driver's license and registration. Jensen barely glanced at the documents. "Step out of the vehicle. You're acting suspicious." "Suspicious how?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. "I was grocery shopping. My bags are in the trunk. If you'd like to see them." "Don't get smart with me," Rodriguez interjected, moving closer to her window. "When an officer gives you a command, you follow it." Sarah stepped out of her car, her heart rate increasing. Around the parking lot, other shoppers had begun to notice the commotion. Mrs. Patterson was loading groceries into her car 20 feet away, watching nervously. Jensen began examining Sarah's license with exaggerated scrutiny. "Riverside Drive. Huh, that's an expensive neighborhood. What do you do for work?" "I'm a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital," Sarah replied. Confused by the question's relevance, Rodriguez laughed. "A nurse? Living on Riverside Drive?" "Sure you are. I can show you my hospital ID if you'd like," Sarah offered, reaching toward her purse. "Don't reach for anything. Jensen shouted, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah immediately raised her hands, her nursing training keeping her calm despite her growing fear. "I'm sorry, I was just offering to show you my identification." "Turn around and put your hands on the car," Rodriguez commanded. "Officers, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please tell me why you've stopped me?" Jensen grabbed Sarah's arm and spun her around, pressing her against her Honda. "You're resisting arrest." "I'm not resisting anything," Sarah said, her voice remaining steady. "I'm asking why I'm being detained." Rodriguez began searching her purse without permission, dumping its contents on the hood of her car. Sarah's hospital, ID badge, stethoscope, nursing certifications, and wallet scattered across the metal surface. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, holding up her St. Mary's Hospital ID. "Says here she's Dr. Sarah Williams, pediatric ICU." Jensen examined the badge. Probably fake. Black women don't become doctors. Mrs. Patterson had moved closer, her phone now recording the encounter. Other shoppers were gathering, creating a growing circle of witnesses. "That's my real ID," Sarah said firmly. "I'm a registered nurse with 7 years of experience. You can call the hospital to verify." "Don't tell us how to do our job," Jensen snapped. He was now going through her wallet, examining her credit cards and driver's license. "This says Sarah Williams, but the registration says Marcus Williams. You steal this car." "Marcus Williams is my husband. It's his car, but I'm insured to drive it." Rodriguez was now searching her car without consent, opening her glove compartment and looking under her seats. "We got a report of suspicious activity in this area." "Drug activity." "What report?" Sarah asked. "I've been grocery shopping for 30 minutes. What drug activity?" "You asking too many questions," Jensen said, grabbing her wrists. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and obstruction of justice." Sarah felt the handcuffs click around her wrists. The metal was cold and tight, cutting into her skin. "Officers, please, I haven't resisted anything. I've answered all your questions and complied with your requests." "You got smart with us," Rodriguez said. "That's resisting in my book." Mrs. Patterson approached the officers, her phone still recording. "Excuse me, officers. I've been watching this whole interaction. This young lady hasn't done anything wrong. She was just shopping in the store." Jensen turned toward the elderly woman. "Ma'am, step back. This is police business." "I saw the whole thing," Mrs. Patterson insisted. She was polite and cooperative. "She works at the hospital. I've seen her around the neighborhood for years." "Ma'am," I said, "step back or you'll be arrested too." Rodriguez threatened by now. A crowd of nearly 20 people had gathered. Several were recording with their phones. Teresa, the cashier from inside the store, had come outside and was telling other witnesses that Sarah was a regular customer who was always kind and respectful. Sarah was placed in the back of the patrol car, her wrists still handcuffed behind her back. Through the window, she could see the crowd of people who had witnessed her arrest. She felt humiliated, confused, and increasingly frightened. "What are the charges?" she asked through the partition. "Resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and public intoxication," Jensen replied. "Public intoxication. I haven't been drinking. I don't drink." "Sure looked drunk to me," Rodriguez added, stumbling around, slurred speech. Sarah knew both officers were lying. She also knew that her word against theirs would likely mean nothing in court. What she didn't know was that Marcus had taught her to always ask for specific information during any police encounter. "What's your badge number?" she asked Jensen. 4471, he replied dismissively. "And yours?" she asked Rodriguez. 3298. "Why?" "I'm memorizing them," Sarah said calmly. "For my lawyer." Jensen laughed. "Good luck with that. It's your word against ours. And we're the ones with badges." As the patrol car pulled away from Morrison's Market, Sarah looked back at the crowd of witnesses still gathered in the parking lot. Mrs. Patterson was talking animatedly to other shoppers, pointing at the patrol car. Teresa was writing something down on a piece of paper. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remain calm. She thought about her husband, wondering if he was still at the office reviewing case files. She thought about her patients, hoping her absence wouldn't affect their care. She thought about the years she'd spent building her reputation as a professional, and how it might all be destroyed by two officers who seemed determined to criminalize her existence. What Sarah didn't know was that Officer Jensen's badge number, 4471, was already highlighted in yellow in Marcus's case files. He'd been tracking Jensen's traffic stops for 8 months. documenting a pattern of false arrests and excessive force complaints. She also didn't know that Rodriguez, badge number 3298, had been involved in 4 previous federal civil rights complaints, all involving black citizens who had been arrested for resisting arrest after initially cooperative encounters. As the patrol car headed toward central booking, Sarah Williams was about to become the most important witness in her husband's federal investigation. The case that Marcus had been building methodically for over a year was about to accelerate into the biggest civil rights prosecution the Metro Police Department had ever faced. The officers who had just arrested her had no idea they had just arrested the wife of the federal agent, who was already building a case to destroy their careers. Marcus Williams drove towards Central booking with the focused intensity that had made him one of the FBI's most effective civil rights investigators. But tonight, he wasn't thinking like a federal agent. He was thinking like a husband whose wife had just been falsely arrested by officers he'd been investigating for months. As he drove, his phone rang constantly. First it was Special Agent in Charge, Patricia Hayes, calling back. "Marcus, I've been thinking about this. You need to recuse yourself from any involvement in Sarah's case. The conflict of interest is pat. They arrested my wife on false charges. Jensen and Rodriguez are already on our target list. This isn't a conflict of interest. This is them handing us our case on a silver platter. You're too close to this." "I'm exactly as close as I need to be," Marcus replied. "We've been building this case for 14 months. We have documented patterns of racial targeting, false arrests, and civil rights violations. Tonight, they did it to a federal agent's wife in front of 20 witnesses, with cell phone cameras recording every second." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" "I need our surveillance team activated tonight. I want every piece of footage from that grocery store. I want witness statements from everyone who saw the arrest. And I want Rodriguez and Jensen's complete service records, complaint files, and body camera footage from tonight." "Done. But Marcus, you handled this by the book. No shortcuts, no emotional decisions. This case is too important." Marcus ended the call as he arrived at central booking. The facility was a concrete building that processed thousands of arrestees every month. He'd been there dozens of times, interviewing witnesses and reviewing arrest records for his investigation. Tonight felt different. He badged his way through security and asked to speak with the watch commander. Sergeant Thompson had worked central booking for 15 years and knew Marcus from his previous visits. "Agent Williams, what brings you here tonight?" "My wife was arrested 2 hours ago by officers Jensen and Rodriguez. I'd like to see her." Thompson's expression changed immediately. He knew about Marcus's investigation. Word traveled fast in law enforcement circles. "Your wife. What were the charges?" "Resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and public intoxication." Thompson pulled up the booking report on his computer. "Says here, she was arrested at Morrison's Market. Public intoxication during a traffic stop." "Sergeant, my wife doesn't drink alcohol. She's a pediatric ICU nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. She was grocery shopping." Thompson read through the arrest report, his frown deepening. "Agent Williams, I've read thousands of these reports. This one reads like a template. No specific details, no witnesses mentioned, no description of the actual behavior that constituted resisting arrest. Can I see her?" "Of course, but I want you to know something. I've been watching Jensen and Rodriguez for months. Their arrest reports all sound the same. Generic descriptions, vague accusations, and somehow their body cameras always malfunction at crucial moments." Marcus was escorted to a small interview room where Sarah was waiting. She was still in her scrubs from work, looking exhausted and confused. When she saw her husband, tears filled her eyes. "Marcus, I don't understand what happened. I was just buying groceries, and they acted like I was a criminal." Marcus hugged his wife, noting the red marks on her wrists from the handcuffs. "Tell me everything, every detail, every word they said." Sarah recounted the entire encounter, from the moment the officers approached her car to their dismissive comments about her profession and neighborhood. Marcus listened with the trained ear of a federal investigator, but also with the growing anger of a husband watching his wife describe being humiliated and criminalized. "They said black women don't become doctors," Sarah said quietly. "They treated my hospital ID like it was fake. They acted like I didn't belong in our own neighborhood." Marcus took notes, documenting every detail. He'd heard similar stories from dozens of other victims, but hearing it happen to Sarah made the patterns painfully clear. "Sarah, I need you to know something. Jensen and Rodriguez are part of an investigation I've been working on for over a year. What happened to you tonight has happened to at least 30 other people. Sarah stared at her husband. You've been investigating them. I've been investigating systematic racial targeting and civil rights violations in the Metro Police Department. These two officers are at the center of it. While Marcus interviewed his wife, his FBI team was already in motion. Agent Jennifer Chen was at Morrison's Market, collecting security footage from the store and nearby businesses. Agent Robert Jackson was interviewing witnesses, getting sworn statements from Mrs. Patterson, Teresa the cashier, and the dozen other people who had watched Sarah's arrest. Agent Lisa Rodriguez was in the FBI field office, pulling every piece of digital evidence related to officers Jensen and Rodriguez, their GPS tracking data, radio communications, previous arrest reports, and complaint files. What they discovered was a pattern so clear and systematic that it read like a textbook case of civil rights violations. Officer Jensen, badge number 4471, had made 63 traffic stops of black drivers in the past 18 months. Of those, 41 resulted in arrests. His arrest rate for white drivers during the same period was 8%. For black drivers, it was 65%. Officer Rodriguez, badge number 3298, showed similar patterns. But more importantly, when Jensen and Rodriguez worked together, their arrest rates for black drivers jumped to 78%. The FBI team discovered that both officers had been deliberately targeting black drivers in affluent neighborhoods, using identical tactics, aggressive commands, searches without consent, and escalating minor encounters into arrests through claims of resisting arrest. When citizens asked questions or requested explanations, Agent Chen's review of the grocery store security footage was devastating. The cameras clearly showed Sarah cooperating with every command, remaining calm and respectful, and never exhibiting any behavior that could be construed as resistance or intoxication. More importantly, the footage showed Officer Jensen searching her car without consent and Officer Rodriguez dumping her purse contents without cause. The body camera footage from both officers told a different story. Jensen's camera had mysteriously malfunctioned, showing only blank footage during the crucial moments of the arrest. Rodriguez's camera had been accidentally turned off during the encounter, then turned back on only after Sarah was already handcuffed. Agent Jackson's witness interviews were equally damaging. 23 people had witnessed the arrest, and their statements were remarkably consistent. Sarah had been cooperative and polite throughout the encounter, while the officers had been aggressive and dismissive. Mrs. Patterson's cell phone video clearly showed Sarah complying with commands, while the officers made derogatory comments about her profession and neighborhood. By 2 a.m., Marcus had a complete federal case file that would have taken 6 months to build under normal circumstances. The arrest of his wife had compressed their investigation timeline and provided them with a perfect test case for prosecution. But Marcus was thinking beyond just Jensen and Rodriguez. The patterns they'd documented suggested systematic problems that went up the chain of command. How had two officers with such clear patterns of civil rights violations continued operating without supervision? Who was reviewing their arrest reports and body camera footage? Why had previous complaints been dismissed without investigation? Special Agent in Charge Hayes arrived at Central Booking at 3 a.m. with a team of federal prosecutors from the Civil Rights Division. They reviewed the evidence that had been gathered in just 6 hours. Security footage, witness statements, service records, GPS data, and communication logs. This is the strongest civil rights case I've seen in 10 years. Prosecutor Amanda Foster said, "We have video evidence, multiple witnesses, documented patterns of behavior, and clear violations of 4th and 14th Amendment rights." Marcus looked at his wife, who was finally being released after 6 hours in custody. The charges against her would be dropped within 24 hours. But the federal charges against Jensen and Rodriguez were just beginning. "Sarah, what happened to you tonight is going to ensure this never happens to anyone else," Marcus told her as they walked toward the exit. What neither of them knew was that their case would eventually expose corruption that reached into the highest levels of the Metro Police Department, result in federal oversight of the entire department, and lead to criminal convictions of 12 officers and 3 supervisors. The grocery store arrest that had started as a routine case of racial profiling was about to become a landmark federal civil rights prosecution. 6 months later, Officer Jensen stood in federal court as Judge Maria Hernandez read his sentence. 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy to violate civil rights, deprivation of rights under color of law, and filing false reports. Officer Rodriguez received 4 years for the same charges, plus obstruction of justice for attempting to destroy body camera evidence. The federal investigation that began with Sarah's arrest had uncovered a systematic operation within the Metro Police Department. 12 officers were convicted on federal civil rights charges. 3 supervisors were sentenced for failing to investigate complaints and covering up patterns of racial targeting. The department was placed under federal consent decree, requiring court-supervised reforms for the next 5 years. Sarah Williams returned to work at St. Mary's Hospital, where she was promoted to head of pediatric nursing. She became a powerful advocate for police reform, speaking at national conferences about the intersection of healthcare, civil rights, and community safety. Her arrest footage became a training video used by police departments nationwide as an example of what not to do during citizen encounters. Marcus Williams received the FBI Director's Award for excellence in civil rights enforcement. But more importantly, he received dozens of thank you letters from families whose loved ones had been victims of the same officers who arrested his wife. The systematic targeting that had affected his family had been destroying lives in their community for years. The Morrison's Market, where Sarah was arrested, installed a memorial plaque recognizing the witnesses who came forward to document the injustice they saw. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who recorded the arrest, was honored by the city council for her civic courage. The federal consent decree required the Metro Police Department to implement new training programs, independent oversight of traffic stops, mandatory body cameras that couldn't be turned off, and regular audits of arrest patterns to identify racial bias. Most importantly, the department was required to establish a civilian review board with the power to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action. Sarah and Marcus Williams moved to a new neighborhood, but they never forgot the night that changed their lives and their community. Their case became a textbook example of how systematic civil rights violations could be exposed and prosecuted when victims had the courage to speak out, and communities had the courage to bear witness. The officers who thought they were arresting just another black woman they could intimidate and criminalize had instead arrested the catalyst for the most comprehensive police reform in their city's history. Justice, it turned out, had no color, but it did have consequences.